Welcome to Healers with Humor,
where healing meets heart and a whole lot of vulnerability.
We're your hosts, Candice and Shelly, two healers navigating life, love, and all the messy moments in between.
Because we believe that healing isn't just about crystals and meditation. It's about embracing the chaos, learning from the challenges, and finding joy in the journey.
Each week, we'll share real stories, insightful conversations, and maybe even a few awkward truths just to help you navigate your own healing path.
And guess what? This season, we're bringing in special guests to share their wisdom and inspire even more connection.
So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea, or just settle right in and get ready for laughs, lessons, and a whole lot of light. This is Healers with Humor. Welcome back, Bright Lights, to Healers with Humor, Season 2, Episode 6, Chakras and Physical Well-Being. What do you need to know? I'm Candice.
And I'm Shelly.
Yay, we're back together again. Talking about the chakras. So, as per usual, we have a candle and a card and a favorite thing. So I will jump in with the candles for today. There's two that came up. So one was acceptance and the other is gratitude. And of course, these are from our friend Lindsay with So Love. We'll put a link in the description. But the overall message between acceptance and gratitude is really about accepting yourself for who you are and allowing yourself to receive and give freely from a place of love. So when we talk about, if we're having an episode about chakras, right, this is all about the heart chakra. And so when your energy is flowing the way it's intended, we're open to all of the goodness that life has. And if for some reason we've lived our life and had a couple of blocks here and there, that energy flow can be interrupted. And so that's really what we're going to talk about today. In the card of the episode, we have Sacred Medicine, Asha Frost, and it's a 38 card. It's called Drum Medicine, Regulation. So again, just a perfect message. Our chakras are meant to spin and rotate, right, in a specific rhythm. And one way to achieve that is through music, movement, and specifically bringing your system into regulation through drumming. So it's interesting. Drumming is not something that I have personally done, but I do love listening to drumming on music. So online, I listen to YouTube music all the time. And I do enjoy the drumming and the rhythmic tones that has. And then my favorite thing is something I created. And so I do have a Healing Your Chakras program. And as part of that, I created a guided meditation. So chakra grounding meditation, it's quick and powerful. And I actually listened to it my own voice myself a couple weeks ago because I really needed to ground. And I stepped out on the porch and put my own voice on, which was a little odd at the beginning, but you know what? It actually really helped. So we'll put that link in the description as well, or you can go to my Linktree profile and get all of my meditations.
Well, the good thing about that is when you have something like that recorded, you actually get to relax and really take it in as opposed to provide and try to take in, which can be really hard.
Yes. Yep.
So I do have a favorite thing this week. I'm still working through astrology, particularly enjoying the book Karmic Astrology by Lisa Wagner. So as we talked to Meredith in episode 3, she really got me focused on the North and South node. And then I've also been diving into, because of the book itself, the house where Saturn sits. And so understanding, what my path and purpose is, what I'm supposed to move away from and into, which if you've listened to that episode, she nailed it. And so I've really been working with that over the last couple of weeks and really enjoying diving into that.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So we'll get started on chakras. So, I looked at this a couple different ways how to describe chakras to our audience, using Google, using intuition, and kind of saying, what is it that we want to talk about in this episode? So to sort of surmise intuition and Google, chakras are energy points or centers in your body that affect the physical and emotional well-being. It's an ancient, complex system And chakra is the Sanskrit word for wheel. For most people, they recognize the 7 main chakras, but there are more. But the 7 main ones are represented by names, colors, and a part of the spine or the body. Let's talk about it from that place and then see where we can connect it to physical and emotional well-being.
Yeah. No, I love that. When I first was introduced to chakras, I thought, how am I going to remember all this information, right? These 7 chakras, where they are, what color they are. And now it's like a second language, right? It's natural to talk about them. I like to think about chakras as the body's energetic nervous system. So just like, blood and oxygen need to flow freely through our body to function, our energy needs to flow freely as well through our chakras to support our mental clarity, our emotional balance, and our spiritual connection. So if we think about from a mental or mind perspective, right, we have these upper chakras. We have the crown, the third eye, and the throat. And if we're linking this to, right, how we link chakras to our physical well being, if we have, and I know you have experience with this, throat chakra blocks of energy, right? We might have some self doubt or have some fear in expressing ourselves. And then if we think about the chakras from a physical standpoint, our actual bodies, right? We store unprocessed energy. So any, past life experiences, stress, trauma, even ancestral patterns, if the chakras are blocked with that energy, they'll manifest in physical symptoms in our body. So I'll talk about the root chakra, right? So if we have an imbalance there, there's going to be, potential for some chronic stress, lower back pain, which I experience, as well as some digestive issues, which we won't get TMI, but we'll share about some of that later as well. So really, when the chakras are balanced, your mind feels clear, your body feels energized, right? Your spirit feels aligned. That's why energy healing, right? What Shelly and I both do, is the bridge between the physical, mental, and emotional aspects of our health.
Oh.
So, talk to me, Shelly, about the chakras from your perspective and how they've connected from a physical, mental, spiritual aspect to your own health.
So I think based on what you said, I'm just gonna call for a good with good reason, right? Because we've certainly the last 2 years working together and then myself working on my own healing journey, right? My throat chakra and a cough has come up for several reasons. So that's been a real one for me to work through, right? One that
Yeah.
I'm definitely aware of. It's been some personal learning, some spiritual healing, and then opportunities within sort of the past life as you referenced.
Mm-hmm.
If I think about personal reasons, right? Asking for what I want and need.
Mm.
I know that we both understand this well. If you're a person who hasn't your needs and wants haven't mattered, this is one of the hardest things to actually do, and I continue to work on this one, and just to give you guys a little background, Candice and I started our conversation today before we started recording, you know, sharing with each other on why this is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
If I think about past life and current life and some hypnosis and things like that that I've done, a lot of it has been regarding the throat chakra and coughs, what I relate and attach my worth to.
Mm-hmm.
So in past lives, right, was I a good mother? Was I a good wife? In this life and other lives, it's the job or wealth or different things that you've had and lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so grief, sadness,
Mm.
worth, and how that's been connected to this lifetime and things for me to work on.
Yeah.
I know when we said we were going to do a podcast, and I realized you meant me too. um, you know, that was one of the times that my throat started acting up, and it was
Mm-hmm.
really about learning to use my voice. I was publishing the book at the same time,
Yeah.
and my throat went haywire.
Yeah.
We had to do a number of sessions in order to get a better understanding, first, of what was going on, But part of that was understanding, did I even have something important to say that people would wanna hear,
Mhm.
right? And so all of those things are different healing opportunities that have come up along the way with my throat chakra, where that's really been a focus for me for the last couple of years. If I think about where you've been working, I'd
Mhm.
like to talk about leaks and blocks. So, because I think you have a lot of experience to share in that area, right? From yourself as well as people that you've had a chance to work with.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with energy healing, right? We learn best from ourselves first, right?
Mhm.
And what we've experienced and how we've worked through some of that to be able to help, right, our clients. And that's one of the reasons that I created the chakra program because there is so much energy that flows and they're meant to be aligned. And when the energy is not flowing, right, when we have an energy leak, right, it's probably because somebody, you're giving your power away in some way, right? If we're thinking about the solar plexus, it's being drained by something. It's usually an outside source, right? Or some sort of unconscious pattern. For me, the root chakra, right, has been a big part of my healing journey. So we talked earlier about, right, there's a digestive system process to that. There's also the lower back pain. I've had massive issues in both of those areas. Understanding the way that the energy is supposed to be flowing and what actually creates an energy leak or an energy block has been really unbelievable, quite honestly, because I just didn't, as a very unconscious person a few years ago, just didn't realize how much of an empath I am and how much other people's energy impacts me. When I actually did a session on this root chakra and I was working with another healer and they were like, "Well, how much energy are you holding in your root chakra from other people?" I was like, "Why would other people be in my root chakra? Why would they be there? I don't understand." And so intuitively, right, I connected into that and there was a percentage and it was way higher than I would have thought it would have been. And so we worked through her process, but it really got me thinking, good Lord, how how many how much other energy am I holding in all of these other chakras that don't belong to me? And how much
Uh,
space is that taking up, right? How many leaks do I actually have? And then, when you think about the digestive system, I was having a lot of issues over the summer. And, I was talking to my friend Shelly and I was like, I really there's something wrong. I don't know what's happening, but this is not fun in any way, shape, or form. And it took the both of us probably 2 or 3 sessions each where I was working on my own stuff, she was working on me. And finally she was like, "Oh, you're leaking energy through your root chakra."
uh.
And I was like, What are you talking about?" Right? How could I that I've already cleared that. I've already worked on that. But someone was connecting in like recording, which we'll talk about, into my root chakra, and it was completely imbalancing my digestive system. And I just, oof, that was a lot, right? To understand that somebody else had the power to connect into my energy and impact my energy in such a big way. And so it taught me so many things on so many levels. And when we talk about these energy cords, again, that's a huge, huge piece of the energy work that I do because I've been so impacted by other people's energy as an empath. Cords are created for a lot of different reasons. Most of the time, or some of the time, they can be healthy cords, right? When you're in relationship with someone, you create these heart cords. It's beautiful, right? There's loving energy that goes back and forth. If you're a parent, you do that with your children. And there comes a time when maybe a relationship doesn't go well or a relationship ends. And those cords actually, I'm going to use the word toxic, become toxic to our system. And for me, they create an enormous amount of pain and dysregulation in my system. And then if we're talking about, so we talked about leaks, we talked about cords, and then really the blocks, right? That's really where the energy is just stuck, right? If we talked about earlier, right, our chakras are supposed to, if you think about them as wheels of energy, right, they're supposed to spin and have a certain cadence. And when we have too much blocked energy, which really happens from trauma, right, happens from our own limiting beliefs, fear, emotional pain, all the things that we go through in life. But it gucks it all up, right, and doesn't allow that energy to just kind of flow freely. That was a lot of information, Shelley.
I
What are
know that's great information though, because it's so important to understand how they're supposed to work and what keeps them from not working
Yeah,
ideally.
yeah. So, Shelley, talk to me about how woo-woo chakras really are.
Well, I definitely used to think that they were a lot woo-woo,
Yeah.
right? You've heard me give the example of I had never gone to a yoga class, and that was really one of the big introductions to me to, I'll just say, understanding that I was having a spiritual awakening
Mhm,
and while I was on this healing journey, and I always give the example of I used to think when the lady teaching the class said, "What does your third eye want?" I wanted a donut, right? Which is third eye is not in your stomach, right? Which you can see again how far I've come.
yep,
But understanding that it wasn't a concept, that it was actually reality, and it really wasn't a far-fetched or woo-woo or something, I'll just say, not practical to work with.
mhm,
The way that I think got to know them best was started taking energy healing classes and getting trained in Reiki.
mhm,
Again, wanting to understand, is this real, right? And for me, it's hard for me to do that without really, deep diving into it. But one of the most eye opening things that kind of proved to me that it wasn't something far fetched or woo woo or just not real was, I started working on my 4-year-old nephew. He was 4 at the time,
mhm,
and I had him lay down on the bed, and I had already checked his body to see where to work, and because they say that children are so intuitive, then I asked him, I said, "Can you show me where on your body that I need to work?" And
mhm.
he moved to the same 3 or 4 chakras that I had identified. He's 4, he
Yeah,
doesn't know anything about chakras. And so I think what was fascinating for me is that a child, right? Someone with no understanding of the word chakras or energy healing taps into their body at such a young age. How's that
mhm,
woo woo, right?
yeah,
To me, that's natural, that's real, that feels safe, something that comes instinctively for a child, right? So I definitely used to think that they were woo woo, but I'm definitely more of the mindset now, right? The value of understanding how your body works, and processes, energy and works as a system.
mhm. So, you and I get chakras, right? We understand them, we don't think they're too woo at this point, but why does it make some people so uncomfortable talking about the chakras?
I've certainly had quite a few conversations with people who were uncomfortable with chakras. And then I also, went to the internet to say, what is it about things that are for me, if I think about my own personal history, I was like, that's a little too out there, far-fetched,
Mhm,
right? But a lot of it, I think, is often tied to a culture or a religion that we just don't understand or that we think is different from our own.
mhm,
But really, it's not in conflict with any religion or culture
mm-mm,
because it's tied to the energy of our own body and how our systems were meant to work.
mhm,
And I think it's just understanding that.
yeah. Well, I think it's because they're not tangible, we can't see them,
Oh, but you can
right?
feel them
You
based
can
on what
feel
you.
them. Yeah. So if you're listening to your body, episode 3, season 1, right? If you're listening to your body and like your nephew did, where the quote unquote pain points are, your chakras are related to those.
Mm,
So as you learn them, you understand them a little bit more. And I think, our Western medical model also just focuses too much on the physical symptoms rather than the energetic, right? Or emotional root. Can't talk today. Emotional root cause of what's actually happening in our bodies. So, talk to us a little bit more. about the history of the chakras or ways that people can get to know the chakras a little bit easier?
So of course I did a deep dive, right? If my own understanding came from my first exposure to chakras was in yoga.
Mhm.
And then obviously in energy healing and Reiki, chakras were a part of that training as well. But when I did some digging, it actually looked like, I mean, chakras have been referenced in several cultures: Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, Greek, and Native Americans. If you think about Native Americans, they tend to use something like the medicine wheel
Mhm.
to talk about where you wanted to work.
Mhm.
Uh, it wasn't really clear to me where it all started, but it all went back to like 1500 BC, which just says, this is something that different cultures have been utilizing for years.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm just catching up on,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because I've only been using it the last, you know, 6 years.
Mhm.
So if I think about where would somebody want to get started? I said I started in yoga and energy healing. How did you get started and how would you recommend someone else to get started?
Definitely started with energy healing. So working through, emotion code and body code. Body code really dives deep into the chakras. And it was interesting to me as I was working through my own personal journey, how much my subconscious, right, was bringing me to chakras that were imbalanced. And so that was really my first understanding of, what they all were. And then they gave good descriptions, right, of what they were impacting, the organs that they were associated with. And it made a lot of sense. I was feeling all of those things in my body. I just didn't know what chakras were or where they were. So that was really the main introduction for me. You don't need to memorize, right, all the chakras, but just start noticing where you're feeling things, right? How things are showing up in your life. Start really kind of paying attention to the part of your body, right? You talked about, what does my third eye want? Wants donuts. Well, maybe not, right? That's really the stomach. But, where are you kind of feeling that energy? And then noticing where you're feeling stuck or out of balance, right? So before you start fixing anything, right, it's really about observing your own energy. Asking yourself, do I struggle speaking up, right? Is that the throat chakra? Do I need some support there? Am I feeling disconnected from love or self worth? I mean, how much we the both of us worked on that, right? From a
So
heart
much.
chakra perspective. It's why I created a whole program around, right, opening your heart in the heart chakra. There's so much that we house there. And then, those doubts. I mean, solar plexus for me has also been a huge area to work on. So if I'm having a lot of self-doubt, I might need to strengthen up that solar plexus or really understand, if there's energy that's impacting that. So really just starting to pay attention to where you're feeling blocked energy or stuck energy in your body.
Or where you can't ignore, right? Because in
That's
the
right.
case of you and your root chakra and
Mm. Mhm.
digestive system, I guess it's contagious today. I'm having a hard time getting words out too. But then I think about my throat chakra and the cough, right? There was no doubt that it was a cough. It was in my throat,
Mhm.
and I needed to see what I was experiencing at the time, right? And so we've said, body code is a great way to look at some of those things. Reiki is a great way to look at the chakras and how they're
Mhm.
doing. Reflexology, which I just experienced a couple weeks ago, is a fantastic way. Your feet are way too honest. You
Mm.
don't you
They
don't
will
want
not tell a
somebody
lie.
you don't want somebody to know what's going on with you. Do not have them touch your feet. But I also think of things, and certainly add to this list if you have other, but, essential oils,
Mm.
they have,
Mhm.
certain ones that are connected to the chakras, music and frequency or sound healing,
Absolutely.
um, dance and yoga poses, right, or movement, right, how to get that energy moving in your bodies. And then my one of my favorites, right, food, right?
Mm.
Fruit and vegetables and the colors that match up to the different chakras. So just one, to and I'm working on what I will call food for the chakras. And by food, I mean like joy for the
Mhm.
heart, So that connects well into this too, right? But really, really feeding those chakras, whether it be in movement,
Mhm.
music, whatever it is that really calls to you. There's so many things that you can do for each of the chakras.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the other piece that I'll add in is I got my belief code certification almost a year ago. And when I started learning all of that, the premise behind belief code, where we start looking at the subconscious, is rooted in the chakra system. So the first,
Mm.
pieces of information that I'm looking at is, where are these faulty beliefs stored in the body? Are they in, the root chakra? Are they our survival, right? And then all the other things that fall under that. But yeah, I love the frequency music, right? So any of the Hertz music, you can find ones that align to the chakras. I usually sleep with that music on. So
Mm.
I will do some muscle testing before we go to bed, and I'll do something that's, mutually beneficial for my husband and I. And a lot of times it's the root chakra, right? So really getting that grounding energy or frequency as you're sleeping is really good. I usually try, even though they say, that it's good, I usually try to stay away from like a pineal gland activation while I'm sleeping. I already have crazy enough dreams. I don't need any more third eye opening while I'm sleeping. But yeah, I mean, we talked about right at the very beginning, right? That drumming. So just that rhythmic, anything that you can do to get your body kind of in that alignment, I think is beautiful.
Yeah, now drumming is great too to remove blocks and where it's moving slowly or a rattle.
A rattle. I was just gonna say that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You
So I
can, yeah.
love that you kinda brought some of the shamanic things in, right? The yoga things.
Mhm.
Depending on whatever your thing is, right?
Yes.
There's a way to work with the chakras that feels aligned for you and maybe things that you already do or enjoy.
Yeah,
So I love
absolutely.
that.
Good. When we do the show notes, we will put in just a quick summary of all of the chakras. We didn't kind of walk through all of those today, but we'll just put a quick summary in there of what they are and kind of what they're connected into. And then share with us where you're feeling your chakras, what you've done to work on your chakras. We always love hearing from you. Any comments, either in any of the podcast apps that you're listening to, we love to hear your feedback. All right, bright lights. Thank you for another beautiful show. We appreciate all of you, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Healers with Humor.
We hope that you found some laughs, a little light, and maybe even a few aha moments along the way today.
Remember, healing's a journey, not a destination, and you don't have to go it alone.
If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who could use a little healing and humor in their life.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and follow us on YouTube and any social media to stay connected with us.
Because we're definitely going to be sharing more wisdom, more laughs, and probably a little more oversharing next time.
Oh, you know it. Until then, take care of yourself, embrace the journey, and don't forget to laugh a little along the way.
All right, so see you next time on Healers with Humor.